Step into the definitive master plan of a nation's undoing in the silent war for Valoria. A radiant, flourishing democracy. The adversary is patient. The decades of stillness suddenly snap into a frantic public assault as the very people sworn to protect Valoria begin to dismantle it from the inside. The economy falters, and the streets descend into chaos.
Valoria sits at the peak of its prosperity. Its economy is flourishing, its democracy is stable, and its borders are secure against any traditional military threat the world could throw at it. Across those borders, a foreign operative named Comrade Kale understands a harsh reality. Attempting to conquer a nation this strong through a conventional invasion would be a suicidal mission. To win, Kale turns to an undeclared total war. This strategy doesn't target the borders. It uses subversive vectors to penetrate the system and attack the nation's foundational principles from the inside out. The primary weapon in this infiltration is a psychological one, the useful idiot. Kale selects two specific targets to drive this wedge. First, Julian, a cynical media elite driven by his ego and a fear of losing his status. Second, Alara, a naive academic who genuinely believes the enemy's system offers a path to perfect social justice. Kale's insight is that you don't need a larger army to defeat a superior power. You just need to tailor psychological weapons that convince a nation's most privileged citizens to act as its own destroyers. Kale deploys the weapon of isolation against Julian by manipulating his vanity. He encourages Julian to dive into introspective meditation and Eastern mysticism, convincing him that global harmony can be found simply by looking at his own navel. This is a calculated distraction. By keeping Julian trapped in a bubble of non-existent harmony, Kale ensures Julian's mental energy is diverted away from the real political threats facing his country. For Alara, the isolation is ideological. By stripping away any patriotic counterbalance in the university system, Kale allows her to pump Marxist-Leninist theory into the minds of her students without any competing perspective. This chart tracks the demoralization phase. It takes 20 years to educate a generation and solidify these ideological inputs. Once these students occupy vital positions of power, the programming becomes irreversible, causing them to reject authentic proof of the enemy's atrocities. The danger of this isolation is that it breaks the link between information and reality. It leaves a generation unable to process the very facts they need to reach sensible conclusions about defending their own families. With the population demoralized, Kale accelerates the timeline. The operation enters the destabilization phase, compressing the war into a frantic 2 to 5 year window. The focus shifts from ideas to action. Adversaries begin a violent assault on Valoria's essentials, specifically targeting its economic stability, its defense systems, and its foreign relations. Julian and Alara, now occupying major media perches, inadvertently serve the enemy's goal by utilizing their massive reach to manipulate and amplify the resulting public panic. They urge the public to abandon free market competition in favor of a massive Big Brother government, promising that surrendering individual power is the only way to secure a false paradise on Earth. This tension culminates in a terrifying 6-week crisis flashpoint. Valoria is brought to the absolute edge of a violent change in its power structure and its very way of life. The useful idiots believe they are champions of social justice and inner peace. In reality, they have become the primary tools pushing their own nation over the edge of ruin. At the height of the crisis, the people's leader overrides the national broadcast. He warns the citizens that the time bomb is ticking and their freedoms are exactly 5 seconds away from evaporating. To break the psychological fog, he projects a vision of the final phase, normalization. This is the cold reality where foreign tanks roll in to silence the nation indefinitely. He reveals the fate of the idealist. When Alara realizes the new regime has no intention of fulfilling her utopian dreams, she revolts. But because she knows too much, she is immediately lined up against a wall and executed as an enemy of the state. The cynic's fate is just as bleak. Julian is stripped of the wealth he was so afraid of losing and sent to a forced labor camp, treated as a disposable tool that has outlived its usefulness. The ultimate reward for the useful idiot is elimination. The very tyranny they were manipulated into installing has no tolerance for those who helped build it. This visceral look at their own potential demise provides the first major shock to the system. The 20-year demoralization begins to crack as the population grapples with the real-world consequences of their programming. The leader then warns Valoria's wealthy capitalists. By trading with this enemy for the sake of profit, they are literally selling the rope on which they will soon hang. Realizing the imminent danger, the terrified capitalists mobilize. They force the government to halt the flow of resources, violently severing all credits, technology transfers, and grain deals with the enemy regime. This resource chart shows the mathematical vulnerability of the enemy system. Without the vital nourishment of Valorian capital and technology, the enemy's self-destructive mechanism begins to starve, causing its expansion to stall as it loses the ability to feed its own machine. Valoria's survival depends on a simple truth. A democracy only remains secure if its citizens refuse the comfort of psychological isolation and remain aggressively alert, educated, and grounded in reality.